Well, we were sitting around here today thinking about all the things that we like to put on cymbals. We're going to try out every noisy piece of percussion we have on this ride cymbal and see if we come out with a favorite and if any of them are terrible. The first thing that I ever heard in terms of adding something to a cymbal was for sure rivets. There are lots of riveted cymbals out there. It's pretty normal. But what if you want to go a step further than that, or you don't have a cymbal with rivet holes in it and you want to add some clanginess and sustain and just color the sound a little bit? Basically, and beyond things that are made to do this, such as sizzlers and things like that, which we're going to get to, pretty much anything that'll stay on there if you hang it over the wing nut is worth a try. So let's get into it. Before we hang anything on this, let's hear what the cymbal sounds by itself. Hey, it sounds like a cymbal. This is in almost all of our videos. It's the crowd favorite and the house favorite. Now we're going to color it up a little bit, starting with a very standard sizzler. Fairly similar to rivets, maybe a little more aggressive, and also gates the cymbal a little bit more because there's more material on it, which we're going to talk a lot about later. There are a lot of products out here that are purpose-built to do this thing. ProMark makes one. There are a lot of similar equivalents. There's also a lot of DIY things you can do, such as like the chain for like dog tags, that kind of thing, or you can make a chain out of key rings. I've seen people use it with the chains that go inside of a toilet bowl for the flush. They're all going to sound a little bit different. The weight and particularly the length is also going to affect how it interacts with your cymbal. For me, I actually carry two of them with me all the time, a short one that's lighter and a longer one that's a little heavier, depending on what I'm going to hang it on, particularly for recording situations. Now moving into something with a little more beef to it, we're going to move on to ankle bells, belly dancer bells, that kind of thing. Now these are super fun because we're starting to get into enough weight that the sustain of the cymbal is dramatically affected. It's taking it away from a normal cymbal sound with sustain and into something that is more like metallic percussion. The hip thing about this is these also sound great if you set them on your snare drum for a similar effect. They're great on the hi-hat as well. I carry them with me all the time. This is one of my personal ones. And I tend to take one that is tied in a circle as these are, and also one that's just in a straight line depending on what I'm going to use it for. Additionally, I have these wrapped up pretty close to the bell, which is having a lesser possible effect because they're not on the body of the cymbal that much. If we hang them lower or across the cymbal, that weight is going to squash the resonance even more and give us another sound. It's worth noting also that this type of bell comes in many different sizes and weights, and depending on what you get, you're going to have a smaller or larger effect on the cymbal you're hanging it on in conjunction with the weight and size of that cymbal. Now let's try another purpose-designed piece that's for this, but you mostly see on hi-hats, jingle rings. The ones we're using today are the original Greg Keplinger Ching rings made by him for me back in the day when I lived in Seattle. They are similar to other products on the market. I love these ones in particular because they're a little bit heavier in weight, feel a little bit sturdier. I've never had them break in my bag or anything like that. They've been treating me well for 20 years. These give a little bit of sustain and a jingle that's closer to a tambourine kind of vibe. They sound great when you crash the cymbal and also when you ride on it. And depending on the orientation of the cymbal, they can hang as they are in this case, or on a flatter cymbal or a hi-hat, they'll remain centered and give a more traditional tambo sustain. We also have an extra one here that has, rather than traditional tambourine jingles, flat pieces of steel that is a different sort of sustain. These are still available from him if you want to find them on the internet. Lots of fun. Keeping in the same sonic range, I also have something that Greg made for me that is a chunk of, well, several chunks of sheet metal and homemade jingles on a twisted piece of steel that looks more like a necklace or something like that. I use it often on hi-hats and also on ride cymbals. Let's check that out. Now, to say this sounds junky is both accurate and literal. It's basically some pieces of scrap metal that did not have another use, that are hammered into weird shapes, and basically just fall together as the cymbal is getting struck and sustains afterward. This is super fun because, again, like the metal shells earlier, they really slow down and squash the sound of the cymbal, taking it more into a less identifiable percussion kind of sound. And they go to tape and they go to audience really well because this is a little louder than some of the other offerings that are here, which is why this is one that stays with me for live things in particular, and moves between the ride and the hi-hat, especially if I want to have a really splashy foot sound with the hi-hat that doesn't affect the stick sound that much. Last but not least, we have some wooden, sort of faux goat toenails on a wristlet. This is a really interesting one because it's designed to mimic goat toenails, which are part of ceremonial things that different native cultures use. They make this beautiful, almost like rainwatery kind of sound when you shake them against each other. I've heard them called dew claws, other things like that. Fairly common. This is a vegan alternative made of wood entirely. And they get that sound similarly when you use them in the way that they are initially designed. When we put them onto the cymbal, the sound of them themselves is quite subtle because they're fairly weighty, but they're not metallic, so they're not clacking into each other quite as brightly. At the same time, in terms of quieting down the cymbal and giving us a more percussive and less sustainy sound, they get us there in the same way, but they don't contribute as much other metallic stuff to the overall sound as we're playing. This can be super hip for very quiet situations where using metallic things on top of a metal cymbal feels excessive or overbearing, and also a great option for if you look at your ride cymbal in one of those situations and realize that the thing is just too loud and you want it to quiet down a little bit. One of the great things that we haven't mentioned so far is that in addition to going on these cymbals, any one of these, as I said with the bells, can go on your snare drum, can be played as percussion in the hand, can get set on the hi-hat. Pretty much anything you can think of where it's going to interact with the kit is going to get you some kind of interesting sound, which is what is so fun about integrating things like this into your standard setup. One of the biggest points that we want to stress is that when you are experimenting with things, remember to remain in an experimental mindset, because no matter what you may think is going to happen when you start to affect your sounds, the likelihood that you are exactly right is fairly low. And the likelihood that it might be totally different than what you expected is very high. A couple of the things that we used today, for instance, the wooden bits, I'd never put on a cymbal before. I honestly had no idea how it was going to sound, and I had to play with it a little bit before we demoed it because it reacted differently than I expected. But that's what I want, and that's what I hope you want too, is to get surprised by sound and then get inspired by the surprise rather than thinking about right or wrong or whether or not it's going to do exactly what you expected and how much it deviates from that. Hopefully it's clear to everybody watching that this kind of exploration is basically where it's at for us. The possibilities, the excitement, the experimentation, the failure, and the success over the course of all of this is just as important as what we are playing on the instrument, because the sound we're making is what is getting telegraphed to anyone that might be listening. And at the end of the day, hopefully we're taking the opportunity to share what we create with somebody. So taking stock of your sound, getting excited about it, and really caring about the quality and tone and choices in the sounds that you make is really what turns the drum set into your instrument and turns the music you're making into your music.